Take a quiet moment right now, if you will. No fancy equipment needed. Just lift your hand and really look at your fingernails, the way you might notice an old friend's face after years apart. Those 10 small nails, the ones you trim or file every week or so, have been right there in plain sight your whole life, yet most of us rarely give them more than a passing glance. You might see a tiny scratch, a bit of dryness, a faint ridge, or the familiar pinkish color you've always taken for granted. But shift your perspective just a little and start wondering what those small details might be telling you, and you'll discover something wonderful. Your body is never truly silent. It keeps a gentle, ongoing record of what's happening inside, and your nails are one of the clearest, most accessible pages in that living journal. Nails aren't just decorations or something to polish for looks. They're living tissue shaped by the same bloodstream, nutrition, hormones, and immune system that keep the rest of you going. The part you see is the hardened, dead outer layer made of keratin, the same tough protein in your hair and skin. But right at the base, tucked under the cuticle, sits a small but mighty area called the matrix. That's the growth factory where fresh cells are born every day, pushing the older ones forward like a slow conveyor belt. Anything that affects your overall health, whether it's a shortfall in vitamins, a dip in circulation, a hormone shift, or even a stretch of extra stress, can quietly leave its mark in that matrix. The changes don't usually shout with pain right away. They show up later as subtle clues in the nail itself. On average, a fingernail takes about 4 to 6 months to grow from base to tip. That means the nail you're looking at today is actually a record of the past several weeks or months. A small groove might trace back to a time you were under the weather or recovering from surgery. A shift in color could echo something that started long before you felt any different. In simple terms, your nails act like a slow-motion diary, written in shape, texture, and hue rather than words. Doctors have known this for generations. Checking nails is a small but valuable part of a routine exam, because those tiny signs can sometimes be the first gentle nudge to look deeper. One of the most common mix-ups folks have is about those little white spots that sometimes pop up. Many of us grew up hearing they meant a lack of calcium. The truth, backed by basic biology, is far simpler and usually much less worrisome. Those spots are most often tiny air pockets, created by a minor bump or pressure at the matrix weeks earlier, something you probably don't even remember. The keratin layers didn't form quite evenly, and when the nail grows out, the air shows up as a bright white dot. It's a harmless reminder that not every little mark signals trouble. Understanding the real story keeps us from unnecessary worry. Color is one of the easiest things to notice. Healthy nails usually have a soft pink glow because you're seeing the blood vessels right underneath the clear nail plate. If they look unusually pale, it can point to lower levels of hemoglobin carrying oxygen. A bluish or purplish tint might suggest the blood isn't picking up quite enough oxygen. Yellowing sometimes comes from a fungal issue or other internal shifts, though it can also simply reflect age or staining from daily life. The shape tells its own story, too. Normal nails curve gently to match the fingertip. If they start spooning inward, like a little bowl, that can reflect low iron stores. On the other hand, if the nail becomes overly curved and the fingertip thickens, what doctors call clubbing, it's worth mentioning to your physician, because it can sometimes connect to heart or lung matters. These are signals, not diagnoses, but they're worth paying quiet attention to. Surface texture adds another layer. Light vertical ridges often appear as we get older, simply because the matrix slows down and doesn't renew cells quite as evenly. Perfectly normal for many of us in our later years. Horizontal grooves, however, can mark a time when nail growth paused for a while, perhaps during a serious illness, an operation, or a long stretch of emotional strain. When the body is busy directing energy to vital organs, nail production can take a temporary backseat, and that pause leaves a visible line as the nail grows out again. Even the skin around the nails deserves a glance. Those pesky little hangnails that crack and snag are often just dryness, but if they keep coming back, it might hint at missing nutrients or too much exposure to water and soaps. Redness or swelling that lingers could signal a minor infection worth checking. The beauty of all this is that you don't need any special tools, just your eyes, a little natural light, and the willingness to look with kindness rather than criticism. Your body is always trying to talk to you in its own quiet language. Hydration plays a bigger role than most realize. When we don't drink enough water over time, the keratin layers lose their flexibility, and the nails can become brittle or dull. Nutrition matters just as much. Protein supplies the raw material for keratin, while iron, zinc, B vitamins, and other nutrients keep the matrix humming smoothly. When resources run low, your body wisely protects the heart and brain first, so nails and hair and skin often show the shortfall earliest, like the canary in the coal mine, only far gentler. Daily habits leave their mark too. Frequent hand washing, strong cleaners, or even typing all day can slowly wear down the natural oils that hold the nail layers together. Cutting nails too short or pushing cuticles back aggressively can bruise the matrix and show up later as ridges or weakness. Angst, stress, poor sleep, or changing seasons can slow growth or make nails less resilient. Even the difference between your dominant hand and the other, or between your middle finger and pinky, is normal. Blood flow and use vary a bit from nail to nail. What matters most is noticing your own personal normal over time. A sudden change that lasts, especially if it shows up on both hands, or comes with other feelings like fatigue or shortness of breath, is simply your body's way of saying, maybe we should pay a little closer attention. None of this is meant to turn you into your own doctor or send you into a panic over every tiny variation. Nails are wonderful early warning helpers, not a complete medical test. They offer clues that can prompt a helpful conversation with your physician, perhaps leading to a simple blood check or lifestyle tweak long before bigger issues arise. Many older folks I've spoken with find real comfort in this gentle practice. They start noticing that after a stretch of better water intake and steadier meals, their nails grow out smoother and stronger. When life gets busy and sleep slips, the nails might show a faint line weeks later. Nothing scary, just a reminder that the body noticed and is keeping score. Building the habit is delightfully simple. Once or twice a week, in good daylight, take 30 quiet seconds to look at each hand. Run a fingertip gently over the surface to feel for smoothness or new roughness. Notice whether the color is even, or if one nail looks different from its neighbors. Snap a quick photo on your phone if you like. After a few months, you'll have your own personal timeline and you'll spot trends your eyes might otherwise miss. Over time, this small ritual does something deeper. It reconnects you with your body in a caring, curious way. In our busy modern world, we often wait for loud symptoms before we listen. But your nails invite you to tune in earlier, more peacefully. You begin to see health not as the absence of disease, but as a living balance, something you can gently support with water, good food, rest, and kindness to yourself. Age brings its own natural shifts. Nails may grow a little slower. Ridges may become more noticeable, and the whole plate can feel a bit less flexible. That's normal, just like gray hair, or a few more laugh lines. The key is knowing your own baseline so you can tell the difference between ordinary aging and something that might deserve a friendly chat with your doctor. And remember, the body is remarkably good at healing when given half a chance. When you improve sleep, ease stress, or add a few more nutrient-rich foods, the new nail growing from the base often looks and feels better. Proof that your efforts are working, even if the change takes months to reach the tip. In the end, this whole practice isn't about hunting for problems or chasing perfection. It's about quiet respect for the incredible system that keeps you going day after day. Your fingernails are humble, steady messengers, always there, never demanding attention, yet willing to share what they know if you simply pause and look. By noticing them with patience and warmth, you give yourself one more gentle way to stay in tune with your health, to catch small shifts early, and to feel more at home in your own body. That kind of awareness is a quiet gift, one that grows richer the longer you practice it, and one that many folks in their later years say brings them a deeper sense of calm and confidence. So the next time you reach for the nail clippers, or simply rest your hands in your lap, take that extra moment. Your body has been keeping good notes for you all along. Now you get to read them with new eyes and a grateful heart. 3 Gie Hai. Viet Lei Duasat Van Bungak. Vakong Juach Rutgon. Take a quiet moment right now if you will. No need to do anything complicated at all. Simply raise your hand in front of your eyes and look at it very carefully. Those 10 fingernails. Those 10 little nails that you see every single day, but have almost never truly observed before. Maybe you notice a few small scratches, a bit of dryness, a faint ridge, or simply the familiar color you've never paid much attention to. But if you change your perspective just a little, if you ask yourself what those tiny details might mean, you will begin to realize that the human body is not silent the way we usually think it is. Your fingernails are not just decorative details. They are not merely something to trim or polish. They are a living part of your body, formed through complex biological processes that are directly influenced by your blood, your nutrition, your hormones, your immune system, and even the smallest changes inside your body. Each nail is like a slow but continuous record, capturing what has happened inside you over many weeks, even many months before. The special thing is that you do not need any equipment at all to read it. It is always right there in front of your eyes, waiting to be noticed. To understand why fingernails can reflect your health, picture again how they are created. The part you see is only the surface layer that has already died. But underneath, at the base of the nail, there is a very small but extremely important area called the matrix. This is where new cells are constantly being born, pushing forward little by little to form the nail. Every change that happens in your body can affect this process. When your body lacks an important nutrient, when your circulation does not supply enough oxygen, when your hormones become unbalanced, or when your immune system acts in an unusual way, the matrix reacts. And that reaction does not show itself right away as pain or discomfort. Instead, it quietly records itself into the structure of the nail. An average fingernail needs about 4 to 6 months to grow completely from the base to the tip. That means what you are looking at today does not only reflect the present, it also carries the traces of the recent past. A small ridge might correspond to a time when you were ill. A change in color might have started many weeks before you noticed it. In that way, fingernails are like a biological diary, except instead of using written words, they use shape, color, and structure. One interesting thing is that most people only begin to pay attention to their nails when there is a cosmetic problem. A nail that turns yellow, becomes brittle, or develops an unusual mark makes them look for ways to cover it up or fix it. But very few people ask themselves why those changes happened. Meanwhile, in medicine, observing the nails is a small but valuable part of the overall evaluation process. It is not enough by itself to make a diagnosis, but it can be the very first signal that prompts a doctor to investigate more deeply. One of the most common misunderstandings about fingernails is the little white spots that appear on the surface. Many people believe they are a sign of calcium deficiency, and that belief has lasted through many generations. In reality, those white spots are usually the result of very small impacts to the nail matrix. Impacts you may not even remember. When the matrix receives a slight disturbance, the keratin layers that form are not completely even, creating tiny air pockets. As the nail grows longer, those air pockets become visible, and you see them as white spots. This shows an important point. Not every change on the nail carries a serious meaning, but understanding their true nature helps you avoid mistaken assumptions. The color of the nails is one of the easiest things to notice. A healthy nail usually has a soft pink tone, thanks to the blood vessels lying right beneath the nail plate. When that color changes, it is often related to changes in the blood or circulation. If the nails become unusually pale, it may mean hemoglobin levels are dropping. If a bluish or purplish tint appears, it may mean the blood does not have enough oxygen. When the nails turn yellow, many people immediately think of a cosmetic issue, but in some cases, it can be a sign of a fungal infection or other disturbances inside the body. The shape of the nails also carries more information than we usually think. A normal nail has a gentle curve that matches the structure of the fingertip, but when that curve changes noticeably, it can be a sign that something is happening inside the body. If the nail becomes scooped inward like the shape of a spoon, this is often related to iron deficiency. On the other hand, if the nail curves upward too much and the fingertip thickens, that is a phenomenon called clubbing. This is not common, but when it appears, it is often linked to more serious issues, especially involving the lungs or the heart. The surface of the nail can also reveal many things. Light vertical ridges often appear as we grow older because the process of renewing cells is no longer as even as before. But if distinct horizontal grooves appear, that can be a sign that nail growth once stopped for a period of time. This usually happens when the body goes through a strong stress phase, such as a serious illness, surgery, or even prolonged emotional pressure. When the body has to direct its energy to more important functions, nail growth can be temporarily paused, and the trace of that interruption is kept in the form of a groove. Not only the nail itself, but also the skin around it deserves attention. Those small tears, often called hangnails, are usually taken lightly. But if they keep appearing, it may mean the body is missing certain trace elements needed to maintain the strength of the skin. Inflammation, swelling, or ongoing pain around the nail should not be ignored either, because that can be a sign of infection or an inflammatory reaction. The important thing to remember is that no single sign on the nail can identify the specific illness with certainty. Fingernails are not a diagnostic tool. They are a source of additional information. Their value lies in providing those first hints, those small details, that, if noticed at the right time, can lead to earlier discovery of bigger problems. And sometimes, simply spending a few minutes each week to observe more carefully can help you understand a great deal more about your own body in a simple but far from ordinary way. If you continue to observe more carefully, you will realize that fingernails do not only reflect big changes, they also record even the most subtle fluctuations in your daily life. Those changes do not appear randomly. They are the result of a whole series of continuous processes happening inside your body, from the way you eat and sleep to the way you respond to stress and your surroundings. Think of the structure of the nail as a multi-layered system. The keratin fibers are not jumbled together. They are arranged in layers, tightly linked to one another. Between those layers are very small spaces that contain water and lipids. It is exactly the balance between these components that creates the shine, flexibility, and strength of the nail. When your body has enough water and enough nutrients, the nail usually has a smooth surface that reflects light gently. But when that balance is disturbed, the first changes are often very small. The surface becomes duller, it feels drier to the touch, or tiny cracks appear that you only notice clearly under strong light. One of the factors that affects the nails the most, but is often overlooked, is hydration, or simply the amount of water you drink each day. When the body experiences prolonged dehydration, not only the skin, but also the nails are affected. The keratin layers lose their flexible connections and become brittle and easier to break. This explains why many people notice their nails look worse in cold weather or when they are busy and drink less water than usual. However, instead of thinking it is only the effect of the weather, sometimes reviewing your daily habits brings the more accurate answer. Besides water, your diet plays a key role in maintaining nail quality. Protein is the main component that creates keratin, so when the diet lacks protein for a long time, the nails can become weak and grow more slowly. But it is not only protein. Trace elements such as iron, zinc, B vitamins, and fat-soluble vitamins all take part in the process of forming and maintaining the nail structure. When any one of these factors is lacking, the nails will keep reflecting that fact, whether you notice it or not. An interesting point is that the body always tends to prioritize the more important organs. When nutrients are limited, the body directs resources first to the heart, the brain, and other essential organs. Fingernails, together with hair and skin, sit lower on that priority list. That is why they are often the first places to show signs of deficiency. This explains why, in many cases, the nails change before you feel tired or notice clearer symptoms. The growth rate of the nails is also a noteworthy factor. On average, fingernails grow a few millimeters each month, but that speed is not fixed. It can increase when the body is more active, when circulation is good, or when the surrounding temperature is higher. On the other hand, when the body is tired, when circulation is poor, or when there is an endocrine disorder, that speed can slow down. A small change in growth rate may not be easy to notice right away, but if you pay attention over a long time, you will see the difference. The differences between the fingers also bring interesting information. Not all nails grow at the same speed. The middle finger usually grows faster, while the pinky grows more slowly. The dominant hand usually has nails that grow faster than the other hand, because it is used more and receives better blood supply. These differences are normal, but if you notice a clear change on one hand compared with the other, that can be a sign of a change in circulation or blood vessel function. Besides the internal factors, fingernails are also strongly influenced by the external environment. Frequent contact with water, detergents, or solvents can weaken the nail structure over time. These substances can break down the natural lipid layer between the keratin layers, causing the nails to lose their adhesion and become easier to split. This is especially common in people who wash their hands often, work in wet environments, or come into contact with chemicals without proper protection. Nail care habits also play a significant role. Cutting the nails too short, pushing the cuticles back too hard, or using products that are highly drying can damage the matrix area. And as already mentioned, any injury in that area can be recorded on the nail for many months afterward. That means a small action today can create a mark that you only notice after a long time. Another aspect that receives little attention is the connection between the nails and the immune system. Some changes on the nails, especially abnormal surface forms, such as small pits or rough areas, can be related to immune system activity. When the immune system reacts incorrectly and attacks the body's own cells, the nail-forming process can be interrupted or changed. These signs usually do not cause pain or immediately affect daily activities, but they are early indicators of deeper conditions. It also needs to be emphasized that not every change carries a pathological meaning. The human body is always changing, and so are the fingernails. Small differences between different times, between different fingers, or between the two hands are completely normal. The important thing is not to seek perfection, but to recognize changes that are unusual compared with your own body. A ridge that appears suddenly, a change in color with no clear cause, or a change that lasts and does not improve over time are things worth paying more attention to. When you begin to look at your fingernails in this way, you will gradually move from simply seeing to truly observing, and the difference between those two things is very great. Seeing is a natural reflex, while observing is a skill that needs practice. But once you become used to it, you will realize that your body is always providing information. It is just that before now, you had not been shown how to read it. When you have become accustomed to observing, one interesting thing will happen. You begin to realize that the signs are no longer separate, but tend to connect with one another. A single change may not say much, but when many signs appear at the same time, the picture becomes clearer. This is also exactly how medicine approaches the human body, not based on a single detail, but on the combination of many factors. For example, if your fingernails become paler than usual, you may not need to worry immediately. But if that is accompanied by feeling more tired, becoming dizzy easily, and your skin also looking less rosy, then these signs begin to have more meaning. In this case, the fingernails are not the cause, but part of the overall picture. They are like a small signal, but when placed beside the other signals, they help you understand more clearly what is happening. Another important point is time. Fingernails do not change immediately. Any change you see today actually began earlier. This creates a certain delay, But it also brings an advantage. You have the opportunity to recognize a problem before it becomes serious. If you take a photo of your fingernails every month, you can compare them and notice changes that the naked eye would find hard to detect when looking at only one moment. Patience and observation is the key factor. Many people only pay attention when something is clearly unusual, but big changes usually begin from very small shifts. A faint ridge gradually becomes deeper. A slightly off color gradually becomes more obvious. These processes happen slowly, and that is exactly why they are easy to overlook. But if you spend time observing regularly, you will begin to recognize trends instead of only looking at moments. Another factor that needs to be considered is symmetry. The human body tends to be symmetrical, so changes that appear at the same time on both hands usually carry a different meaning from changes that occur on only one side. If all the fingernails become more brittle, that can be a sign of a whole body factor such as nutrition or hormones. But if only one or two nails are affected, you should think about local causes such as injury, daily habits, or contact with chemicals. Fingernails can also reflect the way your body responds to the surrounding environment. For example, during periods of prolonged stress, the body reacts not only psychologically, but also physiologically. Stress can affect circulation, hormones, and finally, the way cells are produced. This is sometimes shown through slower nail growth, greater brittleness, or the appearance of uneven marks on the surface. This is a reminder that health is not only a matter of the physical body, but is also closely related to your mental state. Another aspect that is often underestimated is the role of repeated habits. Small actions, when repeated every day, can create significant influence over time. Continuously typing on a keyboard, biting your nails, or even the way you hold your phone can create pressure on the nails and the surrounding area. These pressures are not strong enough to cause immediate injury, but accumulated gradually, they can lead to clear changes. At the same time, the living environment also plays a significant role. Humidity, temperature, pollution levels, and even the water you use can affect your fingernails. In a dry environment, the nails easily lose water and become more brittle. In a damp environment, the risk of fungal infection increases. These factors are not always easy to control, but being aware of them helps you understand more clearly the causes of the changes you observe. One more noteworthy thing is the connection between fingernails and circulation. Fingernails are one of the places where you can directly observe blood flow at a microscopic level. When you press lightly on the nail and release it, the color changing from white back to pink reflects the speed at which blood returns. This is a simple reflex, but provides information about the state of peripheral circulation. If this process happens more slowly than normal, it can be a sign that blood is not circulating as efficiently as before. It also needs to be added that observing your fingernails is not meant to replace a medical visit. It is not a tool for you to diagnose yourself or draw conclusions. Instead, it is like an early warning system. When you notice something unusual, the next step is not to worry, but to seek accurate information or consult a professional. The difference lies in the fact that you become more proactive instead of only reacting when symptoms are already clear. One of the greatest benefits of observing your fingernails is that it helps you reconnect with your own body. In modern life, we often pay attention to outside indicators such as weight, blood pressure, or numbers in lab tests. But we rarely spend time observing the direct signals from the body itself. Fingernails, with their slow but continuous changes, are one of the simplest ways to begin that process. When you look at your fingernails no longer as a small, unimportant detail, but as part of the body's information system, the way you approach your health will also change. You no longer wait until there is a problem before you act. You begin to notice from the smallest signs. And it is precisely this change in perspective, rather than any complicated technique, that creates lasting difference. When you maintain the habit of observation for a long enough time, you will begin to realize that each person has a very individual, personal normal. This may sound obvious, but it is extremely important. What is normal for someone else may not be right for you, and the opposite is also true. Some people naturally have nails that are slightly yellowish, but are completely healthy. Or some people have vertical ridges from early on that have nothing to do with illness. Therefore, instead of comparing yourself with the ideal nail images on the internet, what is more valuable is to understand clearly the normal state of your own body. This process is like learning a new language. At first, everything seems messy and hard to understand. But when you have enough contact over time, you begin to recognize the rules, the repeating patterns, and gradually you can read the changes naturally. Fingernails are the same. Once you have become used to observing, you will easily recognize when something is no longer the same as before. One of the effective ways to improve your observation ability is to combine looking with feeling. Do not use only your eyes. Use your sense of touch as well. When you gently run your fingertip over the nail surface, you can feel the smoothness, the hardness, and even very small changes that the eyes alone have difficulty seeing. A healthy nail usually feels firm but not brittle, smooth but not overly slippery. When the structure changes, that feeling also changes accordingly. It also needs to be noted that fingernails do not react independently to each factor. They are the result of the interaction between many systems in the body. For example, when you sleep too little for a long time, the body is under pressure. The nervous system, the endocrine system, and the immune system are all affected. These changes may not show themselves immediately in clear symptoms, but over time they can affect the cell renewal process, including the nail cells. The result is that the nails may become weaker, grow more slowly, or show uneven signs. Another factor that is often overlooked is the influence of light when observing. Fingernails can look very different under different lighting conditions. Indoor yellow light can make the nail color look warmer, while natural light helps you see the true shades more clearly. Therefore, if you want an accurate evaluation, it is best to observe under natural light. This is a small detail, but it can make a big difference in how you interpret what you see. In addition, keeping notes of what you observe can also be very helpful. You do not need to do anything complicated. Just take a photo or write down a few short notes. After a few months, you will have a timeline of your fingernails, and from that, you can see clearly the changes that you would normally have difficulty noticing. This is especially useful when you want to talk with your doctor, because you can provide specific information instead of only describing things in general terms. Another interesting aspect is the way fingernails reflect the body's recovery process. When you go through a period of fatigue, illness, or stress, your fingernails can record the traces of that period. But when the body begins to recover, the new signs will gradually replace the old ones. You may see the new part of the nail growing out smoother, more even, and stronger. This is like a positive signal showing that the body is returning to balance. However, this process does not happen immediately. Because nails grow slowly, even when you have improved your lifestyle, eaten better, and slept more, you still need time to see the clear change. This is an important point because many people become discouraged when they do not see quick results. But if you understand the mechanism, you will be more patient and continue to maintain the good habits. Age also needs to be mentioned. As we grow older, many processes in the body slow down, and fingernails are no exception. Growth speed decreases. The structure may no longer be as even as before, and the vertical ridges become more noticeable. This is a natural part of the aging process and is not necessarily a sign of illness. The important thing is to distinguish between normal age-related changes and abnormal changes that need attention. One point worth thinking about is the way we usually react to small changes. When we see a problem with the nails, many people immediately look for ways to fix the surface, repaint them, buff them, or cover up the imperfections. This is not wrong, but if you stop there, you may miss the chance to understand the deeper cause. Instead of only dealing with the surface, asking the question why can help you go farther in caring for your health. Fingernails can also be seen as a bridge between what you do every day and the results your body shows. When you change your diet, increase exercise, or reduce stress, Those changes do not only affect how you feel, they are also gradually reflected on the outside. And fingernails are one of the clearest places where you can observe that, if you are patient enough. Finally, the important thing is not that you remember all the signs and their meanings, but that you develop the habit of paying attention. When you pay attention, you will notice when something is different. And when you notice, you have the opportunity to act earlier. That is the greatest value of observing your fingernails. Not to turn you into an expert, but to help you become someone who understands your own body more clearly. When you have gone far enough in observing and understanding the small changes on your fingernails, you will begin to realize something deeper. The body does not only send signals, it sends them in a very logical way. No detail appears completely by chance. Every change, even the smallest, is the result of a chain of causes behind it. And if you patiently trace back, you can gradually understand the connection between your lifestyle, your environment, and the state of your body. Try to imagine a simple situation. You go through a long, busy period, sleep less than usual, eat irregularly, and almost have no time to rest. During that period, you may not feel anything too serious, but a few weeks later, you begin to notice that your fingernails are not the same as before. They become more brittle, the surface is no longer smooth, and ridges may appear that were not there before. If you only look at the present moment, you may think this is a new problem, but in reality, it is the accumulated result of what happened earlier. This shows an important point. Fingernails do not reflect a moment, but a process. And when you understand that, you will change the way you look at the signs. Instead of asking, "Why are my nails like this today?" you will begin to ask, "What happened in the past few weeks or months?" That question opens up a completely different approach, helping you connect the events in your life with what your body is showing. One of the factors that has a strong influence but is often taken lightly is the body's biological rhythm. The human body works in cycles, and when those cycles are interrupted, many systems are affected. Frequently staying up late, changing sleep times, or working in an environment lacking natural light can affect hormones, especially those related to cell renewal. When the renewal process is affected, fingernails may grow more slowly, less evenly, or lose their natural shine. It also needs to be said about the role of stress from a broader perspective. Stress is not only a feeling of psychological tension, but also a complex physiological reaction. When you are stressed, the body activates mechanisms to cope, including releasing hormones and changing the way energy is distributed. In that state, non-essential functions such as nail growth can be given lower priority. The result is that the nails can reflect prolonged stress in very subtle ways. An interesting thing is that the body always tries to maintain balance. When one factor is lacking or disturbed, other systems try to compensate. However, that compensation ability is not unlimited. When the imbalance lasts, the signs begin to appear more clearly, and fingernails are one of the places that show it. That is why recognizing early changes not only helps you understand your body, but also helps you intervene before the problem becomes more serious. In reality, very few people spend time observing their body in a systematic way. We usually only pay attention when something causes discomfort or directly affects daily life. But fingernails do not cause pain, do not make you tired, and do not interfere with daily activities, so they are easy to overlook. This creates a paradox. The earliest signals are also the ones most easily missed. One way to overcome this is to turn observation into a simple habit that does not take much time. You do not need to analyze deeply every day. Just a few minutes each week, under good light, you can look again at all your fingernails. Not to look for problems, but to become familiar with their current state. Once you are familiar with that state, any change will become easier to notice. In addition, combining observation of the fingernails with other signs on the body also gives you a more complete picture. Skin, hair, energy level, sleep, and even mood are all pieces of the same picture. When you look at all those factors together, You will see trends more clearly instead of focusing only on individual details. One point worth noting is not to fall into the state of overanalyzing. When you begin to pay attention to your body, it is very easy to fall into interpreting every change as a serious problem. This not only causes unnecessary worry, but also loses the original purpose of observation. The goal is not to find disease, but to understand the body. And understanding the body includes accepting that some fluctuations are completely normal. Keeping a balanced attitude is very important. You need to be attentive enough to recognize unusual signs, but also calm enough not to overreact. This is a skill that takes time to develop, and it applies not only to fingernails, but to your entire approach to healthcare. Another aspect worth reflecting on is the way we often look for answers outside, while much information is already available on our own body. Modern medical technology brings many powerful tools, but that does not mean simple observation methods become less valuable. On the contrary, when you combine personal understanding with medical support, you can achieve a higher level of proactivity in caring for your health. When you look back at the whole process, from only seeing fingernails as a small detail to understanding them as part of the body's information system, you will see that the biggest change is not in the fingernails themselves, but in the way you look at yourself. You are no longer a passive person, waiting for problems to appear. You become an observer, a recorder, and someone who makes small but meaningful adjustments. And perhaps the most valuable thing is not how many signs you discover, but that you build a clearer connection with your own body. A connection based not on worry, but on understanding. When you have that, the small changes on your fingernails are no longer something to fear. They become part of the ongoing conversation between you and your body, a conversation that you have finally begun to listen to. When you have built the habit of observation and begun to understand the signals your body sends through your fingernails, you will gradually realize that this is not only a skill, but a new approach to health. It is not based on waiting for problems to happen and then reacting. It is based on following small changes so you can adjust early. And in this approach, the important thing is not that you read every sign correctly, but that you maintain continuous and conscious attention. One of the next steps that many people achieve is the ability to connect changes on the fingernails with specific habits in daily life. When you have observed long enough, you will begin to see repeating connections. For example, after periods of irregular eating, the nails may become less strong. After times of full rest and regular living, the new nail growth is usually smoother and more even. These connections are not always clear immediately, but when accumulated over time, they become a very valuable form of personal experience. This personal experience itself helps you adjust your lifestyle in more subtle ways. Instead of relying completely on general advice, you begin to understand what really affects your own body. Some people may realize that drinking enough water makes a clear difference for their fingernails. Others may notice that reducing contact with chemicals helps their nails stay healthier. These things may sound simple, but when confirmed by direct observation, they become much more convincing. Another noteworthy factor is the ability to distinguish between temporary changes and lasting changes. Not every change needs the same level of attention. A small scratch or a slight color change after a long day may only be a temporary reaction. But if a sign lasts for many weeks, does not improve, or even becomes more obvious, that is when you need to pay more attention. This ability to distinguish does not come immediately, but it will gradually form when you have enough observation experience. In this process, you will also realize that the body has an amazingly strong ability to adjust itself. Many changes on the fingernails, especially the small ones, can disappear on their own when the internal conditions in the body are improved. When you sleep enough, eat a balanced diet, reduce stress, and maintain reasonable physical activity, the body will gradually return to balance, and the fingernails will also reflect that change. This helps you understand that not every problem needs immediate intervention. Sometimes you only need to create the conditions for the body to heal itself. However, There are also cases when the body needs support from outside. When you notice clear, lasting changes or changes that come with other symptoms, seeking professional help is necessary. At that time, what you have observed becomes a useful source of information. You can say not only, "My fingernails have a problem," but can describe specifically when the change started, how it progressed, and what factors might be related. This makes the evaluation process more accurate and effective. An interesting thing is that when you begin to observe your own fingernails, you often also start noticing other people's fingernails. Not in a judgmental way, but in a curious way. You may realize the great diversity between individuals in color, shape, growth speed, and structure. This reminds you that the human body does not have one absolute common standard. Each person is a separate system with its own separate characteristics. This awareness also helps you avoid unnecessary comparison. Instead of trying to achieve a picture of perfect fingernails, you focus on maintaining the best possible state for your own body. This not only reduces pressure, but also gives you a more realistic and sustainable approach to health. Another aspect that many people begin to realize is the connection between self-care and the quality of the fingernails. Actions that seem very small, such as moisturizing your hands, protecting your nails when doing housework, or avoiding harmful habits, can create a clear difference over time. These changes do not happen immediately, but when you look back after a few months, you can see the clear improvement. This leads to an important realization. Health is not the result of one big action, but the sum of very many small actions repeated every day. Fingernails, with their slow rate of change, are an ideal measuring instrument to reflect these accumulations. They are not affected by temporary changes, but reflect long-term trends. When you look at it this way, you will see that observing your fingernails is not only a technique, but part of the process of understanding and caring for yourself. It does not require deep knowledge, does not need special equipment, and does not take much time. But if done regularly, it can bring very profound insights. Finally, the most valuable thing does not lie in how many signs you can read, but in building a proactive relationship with your body. You no longer see the body as something separate that you only care about when there is a problem. You begin to see it as a system that is continuously communicating with you. And when you listen long enough, you will realize that those signals are not vague at all. They are always clear. It is just that before now, you had never paid attention. From that point, caring for your health is no longer a heavy task, but becomes a natural process. You adjust when needed. You observe when you can, and you trust in the body's ability to adapt. And throughout that whole process, those small fingernails are still there, quietly but consistently, continuing to record the story that your body is telling every day. When you continue to maintain this attention for an even longer time, one very noteworthy thing will gradually become clear. You are not only learning how to observe the body, but also learning how to interpret change without rushing to conclusions. This is an important shift, because seeing a sign is one thing, but understanding its true meaning is a completely different thing. In reality, many people who begin to observe the body often fall into two extremes. One is to ignore everything completely and see every change as unimportant. The other is the opposite, over-interpreting and assigning a serious meaning to every small detail. Both of these approaches are not truly helpful. What is needed is a balanced state where you are sensitive enough to recognize differences, but calm enough to wait for more information before making a judgment. Fingernails are a classic example of this. A change in color can have many different causes, from simple ones such as contact with the environment to more complex ones related to inside the body. If you only look at a single sign and try to name it immediately, you can easily go in the wrong direction. But if you observe it in a broader context, the time, the other signs, and the changes in your lifestyle, you will have a much more accurate view. This leads to another skill that you gradually develop: the ability to read trends instead of only reading signs. A single sign is one data point, but many signs appearing over time create a trend. And it is the trend that has real value. For example, if your fingernails gradually become more brittle over several months, rather than appearing once and then returning to normal, that is a trend worth noting. On the other hand, a fleeting change that disappears is usually less meaningful. This ability to recognize trends also helps you understand more clearly the impact of the changes you actively make. When you adjust your diet, increase exercise, or improve your sleep, you may not see results immediately. But if you observe your fingernails over the next few months, you can recognize the gradual improvement. This creates a positive feedback loop. You see the results of your actions, and that encourages you to continue maintaining the good habits. A deeper aspect is the way you begin to feel the consistency of your body. When everything is working well, the fingernails usually have evenness in color, shape, and structure. When there is an interruption, that evenness is broken. The change may be very small, but it makes the overall appearance no longer as smooth as before. This is a rather subtle feeling, but once you are used to observing, you will notice it quite clearly. Also, in this process, you will begin to distinguish between the factors you can control and the factors you cannot. You can control your diet, the amount of water you drink, your sleep, and the way you care for your nails. But you cannot completely control age, genetics, or some natural physiological changes. This distinction helps you focus your energy on the things that can be improved instead of worrying about things beyond your control. One thing worth thinking about is the way modern society often separates people from observing their own body. We are used to relying on devices, on tests, on numbers. Those things are very useful, but they do not replace direct understanding of the body. Fingernails, with their constant presence and no need for any tool to observe them, are a reminder that there is very valuable information always available if you take the time to pay attention. This does not require you to become an expert or memorize all the signs. It only requires a moderate level of interest. You look, you record, and you notice whether it changes over time or not. If it does, you learn more or ask for professional advice. If not, you continue observing. That is a simple but effective process. Another benefit of this approach is that it helps reduce emotional reactions. When you see a change in your body, the first reaction is often worry. But when you have the habit of observation and understand that many changes are temporary or unimportant, you will be calmer. You no longer react immediately, but take time to consider and evaluate. This is good not only for physical health, but also helps reduce psychological stress. Persistence also needs to be mentioned. What you are doing, observing, recording, and understanding does not bring results immediately. But over time it accumulates into a very personal and very practical form of knowledge. No book can completely replace this experience because it is tied to your own body. When you have gone far enough, you will realize that observing your fingernails is only the starting point. It opens up a broader way of looking at the body, where you pay attention to many different signals, even the smallest changes. You begin to listen to your body before it has to speak more loudly, and this creates a big difference in the way you maintain your health. Finally, the most valuable thing is not that you are able to detect something unusual, but that you no longer miss the signals your body sends. You do not need to understand everything immediately. You only need to maintain attention, keep an open attitude, and be ready to learn from what you observe. And in that process, those small fingernails continue to play their role, not noisy, not showy, but always present as part of the larger story that your body is telling every day. When you have gone through enough stages of observation, a subtle but important change will appear. You no longer try to look, but the act of recognizing becomes almost natural. This is like when you become familiar with a face. You do not need to analyze every detail, but as soon as there is a small change, you notice it right away. With fingernails, once you are familiar enough, you will detect differences very quickly, even before you can name them. It is at this point that observation begins to shift from a conscious action to a form of intuition. You do not need to remember every specific sign, but you sense when something is not the way it usually is. This is a very valuable skill because it helps you respond early without having to rely completely on theoretical knowledge. An interesting thing is that this intuition is not something vague or hard to understand. It is built from repeated observations, from the times you have seen your own normal state enough. When there is a difference, your brain automatically recognizes that deviation, even before you have time to analyze it. And this early recognition creates a great advantage in following your health. However, for intuition to work well, you still need to maintain a systematic foundation of observation. Intuition does not replace observation. It is the result of it. If you stop paying attention for a long time, this ability will also decrease. Therefore, the important thing is to keep the habit of observation as a natural part of life, not too often, but regular enough to maintain familiarity. In this process, you will also realize that not every change needs to be explained immediately. Some signs only need to be recorded and followed. Trying to find the cause right away is sometimes unnecessary and can even lead to wrong guesses. Instead, you can give the body time to answer through the next changes. If the sign disappears, it may only be a temporary reaction. If it lasts or becomes clearer, then you need to investigate more deeply. Another noteworthy aspect is continuity. The body does not change in sudden jumps, but in a continuous flow. Fingernails, with their slow growth rate, clearly reflect this continuity. When you look back over a long period, you will see a process taking place rather than separate events, and seeing this process helps you understand more clearly how the body adapts and responds. This understanding also changes the way you evaluate health. Instead of only relying on the feeling of being sick or not being sick, you begin to see different levels of the body's state. There are periods when the body is working very well and everything is stable. There are periods when the body is slightly out of balance but still able to adjust itself. And there are also periods that need clearer intervention. Fingernails, although only a small part, can help you recognize these differences. One thing worth reflecting on is the way small changes are often taken lightly, but are the foundation of bigger changes. A slightly dry nail today may mean nothing, but if that condition lasts, it can reflect a problem in the way you care for your body. When you recognize that early, you can adjust before it becomes a bigger problem. This is exactly the value of paying attention to small details. At the same time, observing your fingernails also helps you develop a more patient attitude. In a world where everything happens quickly, we are used to expecting immediate results. But the body does not work that way. Changes need time, and observing fingernails reminds you of this. It forces you to slow down, to follow over a long time, and to accept that not everything can be solved immediately. This patience does not only apply to fingernails, it also spreads to the way you approach health in general. You begin to understand that maintaining health is a long-term process, not a short-term goal. Good habits need to be repeated, changes need to be maintained, and results will come over time. Another important point is trust in the body. When you have observed long enough, you will see that the body has a very strong ability to adapt and recover. Even during periods of imbalance, the body often finds ways to return to a stable state. The fingernails, with their slow changes, show you this process clearly. You can see the new part of the nail growing out healthier and more even as a sign that the body is doing its job well. However, this trust does not mean ignoring warning signs. It only helps you approach them more calmly. You do not panic when you see a change, but you also do not ignore it when it becomes clear. You maintain a balance between observation and action, between patience and proactivity. When you look back at this entire journey, from simply looking at your fingernails to understanding them as part of the body's information system, you will see that the biggest change is not in what you see, but in the way you look. You no longer see the body as something separate, but as a system that is continuously communicating with you. And in that system, those fingernails still keep their very humble but stable role. They do not change suddenly. They do not attract strong attention, but it is exactly that stability that makes them a reliable indicator over time. If you know how to observe, they can tell you a great deal, not with words, but with small, repeating, and consistent signs. Finally, perhaps the most important thing is not that you learn a lot about fingernails, but that you learn how to listen, not with your ears, but with attention. And when you have learned this way of listening, not only your fingernails, but your whole body will become a rich source of information, helping you understand yourself more clearly in every stage of life. When you have maintained this listening for a long enough time, you will begin to realize something very profound. The body is never silent. Even when you feel completely normal, without pain, without fatigue, without clear symptoms, the body is still continuously responding to the environment, to your living habits, to what you eat, the way you sleep, the way you think. Fingernails are only one of the places that reflect that, but they are one of the easiest and most accessible places to observe. This leads you to a different understanding of the concept of being healthy. Being healthy is no longer only the state of having no disease, but a dynamic balance, where the body continuously adjusts to adapt. And in that state, small changes are completely normal. Fingernails can change slightly with the seasons, with the level of activity, with the diet. Those changes are not signs of a problem, but signs of adaptation. When you understand this, you will reduce the need to seek perfection in your body. You no longer expect your fingernails to always be exactly the same, without a single ridge or small change. Instead, you accept that variation is part of the living process. The important thing is not to eliminate every change completely, but to understand when a change is normal and when it deserves attention. One of the greatest benefits of this approach is that it helps you develop a form of body memory. You do not only remember with your thoughts, but with familiarity with the feeling and the image. When you look at your fingernails, you do not only see what is there now, but also remember what they used to be like. This comparison does not need to be absolutely precise, but it is enough for you to recognize the difference. This memory itself helps you identify changes earlier. You do not need to wait until a sign becomes obvious or causes discomfort. You can recognize it when it is still very small and very subtle. And when you recognize it early, you have more choices in how to respond. You can adjust your habits, follow it further, or, if needed, seek professional advice. Another aspect you will gradually realize is the connection between the rhythm of life and the state of the body. When life becomes too fast and too full of pressure, the body often reacts in very subtle ways. The fingernails may lose their shine, become less even, or grow more slowly. On the other hand, when you have real periods of rest, when the rhythm of life slows down, you can see gradual improvements. This is not coincidence, but the result of giving the body the conditions to recover. This also helps you understand that caring for health is not only in specific actions, but also in the way you organize your life. You may eat well, but if you are always stressed and lack sleep, the body still has difficulty reaching a balanced state. On the other hand, when you combine many factors, nutrition, rest, exercise, and mental state, positive changes become clearer, and fingernails are one of the places that reflect that. In this process, you will also learn how to read slowly. Instead of looking for immediate answers, you allow yourself to observe for a longer time, or you let the signs talk to one another instead of separating them. A change in color combined with a change in structure appearing in the same time period can carry a completely different meaning from when they appear separately. It is this combination that creates the full picture. Reading slowly also helps you avoid hasty conclusions. In many cases, a sign can make you worry if looked at in isolation. But when you place it in a broader context, you may realize it is not as concerning as you thought. On the other hand, there are initial signs that are very small, but when combined with other factors, become more noteworthy. This difference can only be seen when you spend time observing. An interesting thing is that when you develop this way of looking, you do not only apply it to the body, but also to many other aspects of life. You become more patient, less hasty in reacting, and more inclined to investigate more deeply before drawing conclusions. This is a change not only in knowledge but in the way of thinking. Coming back to the fingernails, you will see that although they are small and often overlooked, they carry a great deal of information. You do not always need to decode all that information. Sometimes, just knowing that it exists and that you can return to observe at any time is already an advantage. The constant presence of the fingernails also creates a point of support. In a world that changes quickly, there are many factors you cannot control, but observing your body, including the fingernails, is something you can do anytime. It does not depend on equipment and does not need special conditions. All it needs is a little light and a little attention, and you can begin. Finally, what this whole process brings is not perfection, but understanding. You understand that the body is a complex but logical system. You understand that small changes have meaning but are not always something to worry about. And most importantly, you understand that listening to the body is a skill that can be learned, developed, and brings long-term value. And in that journey, those small fingernails are still there, without changing their role, without becoming more important in the usual sense, but becoming a familiar part of the way you observe and understand yourself, without noise, without standing out. They are simply an information channel, but a channel that, if you know how to use it, can bring deeper insights than you ever thought.